Welcome to Gatecrashers, a podcast dedicated to kicking open the door to your next favorite thing. Our mission, our creed, and our code is this: to make all things nerdy more approachable and accessible to everyone. We want you to find a universe that you're going to fall in love with. Tonight, I'm joined by Christopher Cantwell, co-creator of Halt and Catch Fire, writer of Iron Man and Dr. Doom, but we're actually here to talk about your Vault book, The Blue Flame. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I hope people, when you said writer of Iron Man and Dr. Doom, but tonight we're going to talk about, turn the podcast off. We're like, I don't care about that. What is it going to be? Something new? No. Some sort of little pet project of yours?
Pull the rug out from under them.
Yeah, exactly.
I should have been like, oh yeah, Vault book. And then like, hey, Iron Man, you know him from the...
We're going to talk all about Iron Man.
The movie.
The 2008 film with Robert Downey Jr.
Really,
what a fun way into the Marvel universe.
A shame that never went anywhere. Just that one film.
That one standalone film was really, really great.
Good for him.
They should have made more.
Yeah, I really wish they would have. Would have been a phenomenon. So, in the industry, we are known as a pretty hard-hitting bunch of journalists and podcasters. So we always like to start off with a very tough question.
I love it. Let's do it.
What's your favorite sandwich?
Oh, man. Man, this is tough. You guys you bring it. Bring the heat. I love sandwiches. I will say that I'm a big sandwich guy. I'm one of those people that will put red wine vinegar on my own sandwiches at home. I am a big fan of tapenades. Okay, I'll just say that. Boy, if I could sit down and have any sandwich, well, I feel like it's got to be a deli sandwich. Oh shoot, you know what? Okay, no, I'm gonna change. I'm gonna go back. There's a lot of good deli sandwiches I've had, but when I was a kid growing up in Texas, there's a chain of sub sandwich shops in North Texas called Great Outdoors. The Great Outdoors. I'm going to plug the Great Outdoors. This podcast is brought to you by the Great Outdoors. The Great Outdoors. And after church, we would go to the Great Outdoors, and I would get a number 11. And so I would get a number 11, which I believe was, let's see. I think it was like salami, provolone cheese, pepperoni, kind of just the basics, oil and vinegar, yeah? Mm-hmm. Oregano, the normal, kind of like but this is before Subway. So but it's very, very good. And if I go back to Texas and I'm there long enough, I will end up going to Great Outdoors. It's pretty good. The provolone cheese, the deli cut provolone cheese, very good. The Great Outdoors.
So it's still a chain that's still around? I've never heard of it, but I've also never been to Texas.
I don't know how many locations they have. Maybe I bet you they, it could be if you told me 5, I'd be like, okay. If you told me 25, I'd be like, all right. If you told me they've been closed since 2012, I'd be like, well, probably that makes sense, Yeah. Because I feel like Subway, no pun intended, has eaten their lunch. But it was good. It was good. They're good, fresh sandwiches. They were like real subs,
Yeah, I have the same feeling about White Castle near me. People talk about it all the time, but there's only 5 White Castles. There's not many left.
Yeah,
it's a very small.
So long. I remember going on the back of a motorcycle with my uncle to White Castle in St. Louis.
That's it. That is
fighters, belly button bombers.
I feel like the last time I was at a White Castle was 3 a.m. in Brooklyn. So it
seems like the right time to go to a White Castle, where it's I should be asleep and unconscious, but instead, what's the worst thing I can put in my body? Yeah. That's not hard drugs.
That's a story.
A White Castle.
Story of my life.
Yeah.
All right. So I did actually, the first question is the The second question is a little bit more thematic.
Okay.
So a lot of your comic work has revolved around characters who wear costumes or literal suits of armor that cut off the true version of themselves to the world around them. What do you think that says thematically about these characters when they put those barriers up?
I think it's, well, that's a good one. I think that, at least speaking from my own experience as a person, I think connection is something that is so, connection between people that is so alluring and desired by, I would say, everybody, including people who are maybe lying to themselves and saying no. But it is such a tricky proposition because the moment you actually can connect with someone on a real human level, you're making yourself vulnerable, right? You're putting yourself at risk. So I think the characters that I've been writing, especially if you look at somebody, you talked about the suits of armor, you talk about, Victor Von Doom or Tony Stark. I'm writing them from a place of they're having a hell of a time connecting with people. And I would say, in a way, connecting with themselves. I mean, they're inside the suit of armor with themselves, but I think they're compartmentalizing a lot. So that desire for connection, and then also lack of connection and feeling frightened of connection, that's a big theme, I think, in a lot of work that I feel kind of absorbed in. It feels like that's a big thing that I like to explore, just because I feel that way. We put on different masks, different versions of oneself to try to appease somebody else, right? Like putting on a mask is also something I think I do at least for other people, to try to give them what they want, right? I think superheroes are kind of a very simplified, stark version of that, right? No pun intended with Stark. But I'll be this hero for you. I'll be faceless. I will literally erase my face for you and save you and take care of you. And that will be really good for you. But in the process, I've erased myself. And so when I go home and take this armor off, I'm going to be a bundle of nerves and a mess of emotions, and I don't know how to deal with it. And it's going to be very problematic for me. But that's not your problem today, good citizen. I'm here to help you. Or if you're Dr. Doom, kill you or, control you.
That was a heavy answer.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You want to go back to sandwiches?
Not at all.
Another sandwich I like. No, sorry.
We've got some more heavy stuff after this too. So I actually got to interview you a couple weeks ago for CBR, and you spoke a little bit about wanting to test the idea of what a superhero is with the Blue Flame. What about the ideals of heroism in like their ideal superhero world versus the modern world made you want to put that under a microscope?
I wanted to see how it could function in the real world, and why, I think superheroes and some comic book work, gets labeled escapist, and a word that I understand and I think also need in my life in terms of story. Escapism is important, I think, when it comes to, being able to detach just for a second and give your brain and your soul a rest. That's what and also it gives you something that's kind of innocuous to talk about with other people and connect in a way that is not threatening or vulnerable, speaking of what we just talked about. But I remember the idea for the Blue Flame came out of just an immense frustration and feeling of helplessness when looking at the various crises occurring around the country and the world, and in, every kind of walk of life, whether that be the very mundane daily existence or these, larger, infinitely complex emergencies or problems or tragedies. And it made me look at this stuff that I love. I mean, even here, I'm surrounded by toys and action figures and things like this, and I love them and glom onto them, but it forced me to kind of rectify the idea of that and the experience of actually being in the real world. And that's not a new idea, but it's one that kind of took hold of me with some real fervor. And in 2021, or I guess even this was a few years ago when I had this idea before I brought it to Adrian and Damien, but is the very idea of a hero, not even a superhero, like the idea of a hero antiquated? Are we so quote unquote savvy and jaded and tired and media saturated that we don't trust our heroes anymore, or what does a hero actually look like? And I don't mean in the sense of like, why doesn't Bruce Wayne spend all of his money, investing in community programs? I don't mean that. Because he probably does. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, don't you think that Bruce Wayne is like, got this foundation over here, and he's got this cancer foundation over here, and he's got this orphanage over here, and he's got this over here. And like, but the thing, what's interesting about all of that and the Batman of it all. So he's doing Batman at night, and he's doing this over here, and he's cashing this check, and he's pulling this trigger, and he's investing in this ethical suite of stocks, that don't market weapons and guns and all kinds of stuff, and making sure the company doesn't produce those things either. And the world is still real shitty. That's why there's been 800 issues of Batman. And that idea of the superhero can never really win all the way is something that I wanted to look at and try out in a story, and not in an angry way, in a way of what does it mean to want to help and want to heal and want to save, knowing that you can't actually do that permanently for anyone at the end of the day. Yeah.
How do you find yourself approaching the superhero genre in this way without crossing into just like cynicism in general?
I think because what I've realized recently is that as cynical as I can maybe sound sometimes when I get upset about things or when I feel really hopeless, I don't think I am a cynic. I think that there's something in me that is almost childlike that refuses to let go of hope, right? I remember reading this book, I think it's called Manhood for Beginners by Michael Chabon. This was years ago. It was before I had kids. I have 2 sons now. And there's this idea that he says in the book of, I'm paraphrasing, but like there won't be a future unless we believe there will be, right? If we just accept that the world's going to end in the next 3 years, like might feel vogue right now among, say high schoolers or middle schoolers who are picking up that vibe from a real concern and alarm over the way things might be headed in general in the world, there can be a defeatist attitude where it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And as someone with kids, and even, shared among people, friends of mine, close people in my life who also don't, it's like, hope is very important, and sometimes hope is the only light that's kind of still on that can kind of keep us moving forward. And I think hope is obviously a big cornerstone of some of the best superhero stories, is hope. But how painful is it to kind of carry a torch like that when you literally are nearly annihilated, in so many different ways in your life? That's a superpower unto itself, as someone who can really kind of carry forward hope despite some really serious stuff that may have happened to even them,
The problem with doing interviews like this is that I ask questions like this, and then when I hear the answers, I'm just like, wow, these people are so smart. Like, this is like...
You asked a question. No, I mean, look, I don't think it's smart. It's just like,
Yeah, it's true.
I just don't think I'm good with my feelings, but I've been able to articulate why. It's like, I feel too much and I can't handle it. You
got to channel it somewhere.
Now I'm hyperverbal because I was fucked up as a kid. I don't know.
Yeah, I trust me. I feel you on that one. So what about the idea of the hero do you think is more true today than it was, say, in the Golden Age, or vice versa? Like, what do you think works in hero stories in the modern world that may have worked before, not worked before, and the tables flipped?
Well, I think the one thing that might come to mind is that today I think the best hero stories is that there's this radical idea of a hero literally being for everyone. I think in the Golden Age that was said, but I don't know if it was necessarily practiced, because I also think that society was just kind of closed off and walled off, and certain people were marginalized and certain experiences were siloed, and certain things were written for, just kind of assumed to be for the same kind of small pool of people. And I think the really good stories, I will say, even out of that period that have lasted so long, and stories since then, and then especially today, I think there's an emphasis on the idea of heroes really being for everyone, but really taking that seriously and taking it to the nth degree. What does that mean? What does the hero need to understand about so many different groups and types of people in order to be their hero? That has me thinking about, I'm writing this Captain America book that's coming out over the summer, and, the United States of Captain America. And the book for me is it's not that Steve Rogers didn't know this before and has been living in ignorance. It's like Steve Rogers is doing a gut check with other Americans going, how are we doing? How am I doing? Right? It's okay. I think that's good. I think if someone is worried about things like that, who am I speaking to? Who am I representing? Who am I actually trying to help? Is my help helping? I think someone who worries about that and takes it seriously and actually does have the courage to go up and say, am I helping? That to me is a cut above. And that makes a character like, of course, a character like Steve Rogers would do that. Of course, a character like Sam Wilson would do that, right? And pushing the heroes to be more heroic in these kind of new ways that we haven't explored and weren't explored maybe in the Golden Age because they didn't think about it, which is fine. And also, by the way, sometimes they did, and that's when it was like truly revolutionary and like, holy moly, right? And I think that's why there's been such a long tail on the medium, the superhero genre. So I think that to me is what speaks to the modern age. And I don't mean like message plays, right? Mm-hmm. I think the best stories are a mirrors, not a message, right? But they've got to be mirrors, right? So they can't. Yeah. They have to look. They have to see it all. So yeah.
I know you've probably had to talk about your Captain America thing in a million different interviews, so I don't want to.
I actually have not had any interviews about Captain America yet.
Really?
I think it's because it's new and it's not out yet.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. I wanted to ask about. I can't remember the name exactly, but it's the DIY Cap, the one who's got like the punk aesthetics and things like that.
Yeah, and there's a handful of these kind of grassroots caps. That's the idea, is that he discovers. Yeah.
That was going to be like the grassroots movement of it. Is that him? Is that you and the team's way of showing that this idea of Captain America is so much more than just one person? It's an idea, and him getting to see what that means in modern day America.
Yes, and that's exactly it. And again, I don't think that's a new idea. I think that the best Captain America stories have always been about that. Whether you look at John Walker, whether you look at Isaiah Bradley, whether you look at Sam Wilson, whether you look at Bucky Barnes, and then coming back as the Winter Soldier. I mean, you look at the Golden Age stories of Bucky Barnes, and then the Winter Soldier stories, and it's two different characters and then also the same guy. I mean, the malleability of that is fascinating to me. And I think that, I think what it is it's literally, it's Cap and the other dudes driving around looking for a shield, and they're seeing how their work and their symbol and their iconography and their message and their way of life is being interpreted and received by different places and people in the country, of which there are lots, right? And so, a lot of it is some of it comes out of love. Some of it comes out of love and respect or admiration. Some of it comes out of great idea, but I actually think we could use a little bit more of that over here. Or I don't really love what you guys are doing with this over here. This piece is interesting, but I think I would like to iterate on this idea and go do this over here. You know, it's kind of the same way that like the internet was made, right? It's like people going, cool idea. I'm going to do this and we're going to try this. And this guy over here is going to do this. And then all of a sudden we have this nearly sentient organism that there's no off switch of. You know, so just Captain America is a little the same way in terms of how he functions in the ecosystem. So it's literally like Steve is on a motorcycle going, oh, wow, like the Kickapoo Indians, Native Americans have discovered a different way of seeing this. And it's fascinating to me. And it's going to make me look at myself as a guy.
Yeah. And I know Aaron is the DIY cap that I mentioned.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the creation of Aaron? Because I saw it and I really wanted to know more, but I'd love to hear thoughts if you have them.
Well, for me, there's a couple things. I mean, one, you know, the artists that have put together that solo story play a large hand in the way he looks and what he's doing and his perspective. But that one did start with me, where I've been very interested in rail rider culture. I think it's something fascinating, something that is very can be relatively invisible to other Americans, but is actually something that has quite a legacy in the country, just like Cap. I think there's a homeless crisis in this country where those people are also invisible and disenfranchised in a way that could use some interesting, you know, perspective on in terms of who serves those communities. Of course, Steve would, you know, and like, of course, probably even John Walker would, right? Like if there was a situation at hand involving someone from any of these communities we're talking about in that book, those guys are there. Like they've got their hangups, John more than most, but like they even now, right? Like, I mean, you look at Christopher Priest's book and it's like, they're doing it their way, but they're one guy, right? So, but what they've done is so powerful that now it's this idea, right? It's this idea. And so what does that idea look like when a kid who ran away from home, you know, and is queer and had a lot of problems in his house and decided to take off, but also loved this one thing from his childhood that otherwise sucked? What does it look like when he translates that idea into his world? You know, which doesn't look like Steve's world day to day. You know, Steve's not a rail rider.
Yeah.
Although that would be interesting.
It would be interesting. I do love the exploration of different subcultures in America, because a lot of them are forgotten. Mm-hmm. I'm beyond fascinated by truckers. That's like something I've always been.
Truckers, I think, are fascinating.
It's such an interesting subculture and community that you and I don't know how much long road trucking you do.
My uncle was a trucker for Roadway for 45 years or something.
Wow.
So I'm actually closer to it than you'd think. But again, that's an experience that I'm fascinated with, but I don't have any personal experience with. But his stories of being on the road are wild. And even then, it's very different now, right?
Especially because of some of the automation stuff they have in the trucks where they don't get to keep their own logs. Besides the point, but
drinking the Teamsters. Yeah, let's talk about the Teamsters.
The Teamsters.
Today on Gay Crashers, sandwiches and Teamsters.
You guys like comic books? How about long road trucking?
Try this. Hold on. But no, like, look, this is like it. But this is kind of the magic of, you know, writing for me is like, where does the mind go? Where does the mind wander? Where does the mind preoccupied? And, you know, it's different things, you know, and then those things just seem, there's just a lot of different rich veins that if I feel like an imaginative mind or a creative mind or just a mind that is drawn to new ideas like a flame, right? That's what that story is about in Captain America too, right? It's like people going, oh, cool, right? And then, but let me make it mine. I mean, that's kind of a pastiche postmodern thing, but it's what we've been doing for 30 years already.
When you were creating the Blue Flame, was there any sort of typical tropes that you wanted to include in the story and ones you wanted to exclude?
Well, I wanted to include the idea of a team. I wanted to subvert that by making them all they're all normal people. There's no one with superpowers in the Blue Flame, at least in one kind of part of the story. The story is really kind of a Venn diagram that blurs together, and then it starts to kind of cross over where there's a cosmic part, and then there's a very kind of realistic Milwaukee setting, and then there's kind of what exists in between, and it's purposely hazy as we experience it through Sam's eyes, who is the Blue Flame, Sam Browser. But I wanted that, there's kind of with him, there's this American ingenuity in terms of what he's built and how he uses it. But then on the cosmic side of things, I wanted to lean really hard into the Jim Starlin, Silver Surfer, go deep, go like the kind of New Gods mythos, and just have him exist in that kind of free association version of that realm. Because again, you talk about where the mind goes there a lot, which is just how the heck I'm working through the New God saga right now. My computer's actually perched on top of the absolute fourth world to get it high enough. And it's I love it, and it's rich, and it's emotional, and you can see what he's doing with I think Orion might be Darkseid's son. He fights like someone from Apocalypse with the passion of 1,000 suns. Speak not of this, and then Scott Free shows up, and it's well, I was an orphan with some other castaways, and you're well, I know where that was. It's there's some real great emotion there, but you're also how did he come up with all of these things? How did he come up with the detail? And there's a marveling at the man's mind where it's the newsboy car that they're built, that the new owner of the Daily Planet builds and has them, and it's this incredible tank / F1 racer, and they're all in it, these paper boys. That kind of stuff is so fat, that limitless imagination. So that's definitely a thing I wanted to bring in that felt right for superheroes, that limitless imagination. So on the cosmic side of the Blue Flame is very much that. It's that is me going, and then there is a giant archive full of small translucent discs detailing the histories of every civilization in pictorial and video form, right? It's
I am so excited.
Yeah, and it's we're gonna do that, and it's we're gonna do a rescue in the exosphere of a planet.
I'm so pumped.
Kind of stuff. Yeah.
The first issue has a little bit of the space elements, but now I'm real. Especially the fact that you're reading Fourth World right now is a very good indicator.
Yeah. And then in terms of stuff I wanted to exclude, it's an interesting question because I don't know if I thought of that. It probably just happens without me realizing it. I just gravitate towards certain things and then put them in, and then other things I'm leaving out. I think I'm not doing well, I mean, there's still things I love that just don't have a place in this, where it's just here's the Blue Flame's latest vehicle, it's his bat tank, whatever it is, his flame wagon, I don't have that in there.
The flame wagon.
Flame wagon. I feel it's a little too tongue in cheek
it's a great name,
for modern audiences, but why not? There's stuff like that I love, but it's well, this is not going to go in here. But I think it's really the limitless imagination and the purity of it, right? So that kind of Fleischer Superman, my God, there's just the swelling of the chest.
Yeah.
The enlarging of the chest cavity.
Yeah, it's very showman-y.
Yeah, there's some of that in there for sure, and then just the sprawl of it, the epic nature of it, all of that stuff is in. And yeah, and then And then on the other side is, the Milwaukee story is like that's the mild mannered side of it, which, I use those words purposely because it started with, that kind of element, right?
Yeah.
It's who is the person, but like, who really is the person?
And so the Blue Flame is the first Vault superhero.
Yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah. I had to make sure today as I was writing things up, and I was like, wait, this is it. This is the first hero. How did you pitch this story to a company who does horror and sci-fi?
I do this with Karen Berger too, where I'm like, what if there was a woman who flew in the air? But it's not what you think, Karen. Don't hang up the phone. It's the same thing with Adrian, where I'm like, what if, hold on. But the question I'm asking is, is the superhero even relevant now?
Yeah.
Is it even relevant? Has the idea of the superhero served its purpose? I don't have an answer there. I'm sure people will read into my inflection on the podcast and be like, what an asshole. No, like, I write Iron Man. I love writing Iron Man. I have Iron Man toy over there, and Captain America there, and Spider-Man, and the New Gods, and there's Jim Kirk, and like, they're all in here. This isn't a video podcast, right? So
nope, no one can see this.
This is my water bottle, right? This is my Spider-Man water bottle. So like, yes, I love them. But that also means I want to look at them and go, why? I'm 39 years old. It's 2021. Climate change is going to make fire season in California insane. We were already huddled in our house last year with 2 N95s on, one for the smoke from the fucking fires and 2 because of COVID. We can't go outside. I got to be careful going into Home Depot. I don't get infected with the death thing. And then also go outside and make sure my kids can breathe the air inside the house. Why do I care about, why do I have Squirtle on my bed? You know what I mean? It's like,
wow.
So it's looking at that. And I think the idea really came out of a place of that, which is, Jesus, I open up my internet browser or Twitter and go, I don't have to go look for this stuff. It finds me. This is awful. And yet I find myself preoccupied with this. But again, that again starts to really define the word escapism for what it really is. And how much of the heroism and the superheroism and the costuming and the armor is the escapism for the actual person himself doing it, right? How far does that escapism go? Spider-Man has some flashy threads. So does Tony Stark. Like, I'm sure that it's much easier, and they've talked it. This is not a new idea either. This has been in the books for decades. It's so much easier to be Spider-Man. It's so much easier to be Batman. It's so much easier to be the Blue Flame.
Because you don't have to deal with all the emotions.
Yeah. And it's not that that's bad. If you can't face your own life, and that's the reason you're doing it, and it becomes too much, you got to find a rebalance, right? So it's just looking at that.
Dang. So let's talk about Sam, the actual Blue Flame.
Okay.
A boiler repairman? Is that his what his profession is?
Union in the solicit copy, I think it says HVAC repair, because I was like, yeah, probably shouldn't put boiler repairman, like union boiler repair guy in the copy. People would be like, wow, like, this is niche. But yeah, I wanted to give him something that, well, one, we were just talking about, we kind of glancingly referenced the Teamsters, but I think unions are something that are really interesting in America. We don't get into it really at all in the Blue Flame, but like, make him a card carrying boiler maintenance guy. That's something that feels at once timeless and nostalgic and from another time. And also, people are still doing it. Like, it snowed in Colorado today. Like, somebody somewhere in Colorado is down in a basement making sure the boiler works.
Yeah, it's like, it's those I don't want to say they're invisible people, but it's these people who are doing these jobs that it doesn't often come to mind.
Yes.
So getting to explore that is very interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And Sam does walk these 2 very distinct lives. He's the Blue Flame and he's Sam.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think he sees himself as? Who do you think he sees him as?
I think previous to the first issue, I think he's I mean, I think previous to the end of the first issue, I should say. That's a really good question. I think he's, in my mind, at least from a writing perspective and as a reader, as much as I can be one, something I wrote, but I even when he is the Blue Flame, in his world, he's still Sam, right? He goes to the car show to sign autographs. That actually, I think that was inspired by when I went to a car show with my parents. I used to go to car shows with my dad all the time in Texas, and like each summer when I was young. And I remember one summer RoboCop was there, right? Like RoboCop showed up. It was like,
that's awesome.
RoboCop, cool. Adam West. I remember Adam West jumping up on stage in the Batman costume. Like, and he was there to sign autograph. It's still, but it was like, that's awesome. It's Adam West. But like, I think Sam is kind of in that place.
Yeah.
And they are doing things. Adam West wasn't actually out fighting crime in Dallas later that night, but like maybe he was, I don't know.
Yeah. You don't know with Adam West.
Adam West, I wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah.
In costume. But Sam is Sam, but I also think Sam is in denial about a lot of things, because at the end of the first issue, or not even in denial, he just hasn't done, he's like a lot of people, he hasn't done any work on himself. He doesn't live in a major coastal city with a lot of disposable income to go to therapy. Okay. He doesn't, I don't think Sam has a lot of hobbies. I think Sam's existence can maybe be very rote at the beginning, and there's a pretty intense thing that happens in the first issue that's going to make him turn around and look at himself and go, well, wait, who is Sam Browsum? He spent a lot of time preoccupied with being the Blue Flame and being a nice guy, being a good neighbor, being a good boil repairman, paying his union dues, but like, what's going on with him? You know, like,
yeah,
what's his family situation? You know, that's something we're going to get into. What's been going on with his personal life that he's been kind of avoiding? He's been kind of living his work, you know? I would dare I say, like, shitting where he eats, you know what I mean? Where it's just like, he's been kind of focused on this other thing over here for a while, and to the cost of some other things in his life. So when that gets upended, you know, there's a little bit of reckoning to do. Yeah.
So he is a blue collar worker. Mm-hmm. As a New Jerseyan, I have to ask you, does he like Bruce Springsteen?
Oh man. Well, yeah. Okay. So it's Milwaukee. So let's see. And it takes place now. So let's see. I forgot how old Sam is in the book. He's younger than me, and I'm 39, but he's not super young. He's like around the same he's approximately the same age, but I don't know. It's interesting to like think of what kind of music Sam listens to. I mean, I think he'd definitely appreciate it, but I also feel like Sam's probably a radio guy. You know what I mean? Just like whatever's on the radio, and if it's not good, he turns it off. Maybe he has like a couple CDs from high school, you know, that he still throws in. I mean, hell, I was listening to a playlist today, and like Daughter by Pearl Jam came on, and I was like, yeah, I know this. I'm enjoying this because I know it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, I know this so well, I'm just going to wear it. And I feel like that's kind of how Sam lives a lot of his life at the beginning of the book.
I had that the other day with, have you ever heard the song Freshman by
The Verb? Oh yeah.
The Verb. I'm sitting in my girlfriend's car, and it comes on. I'm like, oh, I love this song. I don't love that song. I've heard that song probably enough times in my life to know it. And she's like, oh, I've never heard it. And I was like, oh.
What? Oh, see, I love that song. When I was young, I knew everything. That's a great song.
It's a good song. After I listened to it, I was like, this actually is a really good song.
It's good. It's heavy though.
It is. It was so much heavier than I was expecting. I was like, oh, this is really sad.
Songs from when you're in high school, no matter when you went to high school, and you're like, that was a really intense song. And I was jamming to it with some friends, you know?
Yeah, it was like a fun song for us. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is
about like losing a kid, or another one of those. Yeah.
How many of these songs do we have?
It's a lot. You get into Ben Folds. I mean, you're doing a lot. Like
that is literally where I was going. I was like,
you know, it's like, oh shit, man. Yeah, and you're like, what a great song when you're 16 and you listen to it. You know,
Ben Folds is the one, because someone was like
head to 39, and you go like, what a great song, you know. And it's like from a real place of emotional and existential fatigue. He gets it. I
accidentally saw Ben Folds once. at New York Comic Con.
Whoops. Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, the same day we accidentally talked to Grant Morrison. My brother goes, "Hey, there's a concert tonight," and I was like, "No, there's not." And he goes, "Yeah, there is. Let's go." Turns out later that it was press only, and at that point, this is probably 7 years ago. I was still in college, so like I was nothing. We just snuck into this press only concert and watched the whole thing and left.
Amazing. And it was Ben Folds.
Yeah. It was. I love Ben Folds. Now I know how sad his music is too.
It was very sad.
So the Night Brigade, I do want to talk about them. They're a pretty diverse group of heroes. That's something I did need to ask you. Are they vigilantes or are they heroes to you?
Well,
your
I think
characters.
It depends on who you ask, right? I think if you ask them, they were like, "We're heroes," and I think the Milwaukee Police Department probably has a different opinion, right?
Yeah.
Like my dad, if he lived in Milwaukee, would be like, "Those Night Brigade people," you know. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like that, and some people are like, "This is awesome," and some kids who think they're great, and they show up at the car show and they can get their picture taken with their favorite member.
So with the I know you're a comic book fan. What was your process to creating a superhero team?
Well, actually, I pulled. Well, one, there's a couple. There's again, it's a conflagration of things that come together, right? So, there's a character in there named the Feet, which is spelled Feat, and he was my favorite. Big guy.
Yeah.
Who clearly is just like the strong man of the group. And that's a character I've had in my head probably since I was in college. So going back like 20 years was a character I kind of came up with. So I finally found a place for him. And then the others, I really looked at the racial demographics of Milwaukee, and I wanted them to feel as authentic as they could coming from that place, like Sam. It was important that they share that kind of thing with Sam. And they were a unique group because I don't give too much away, but like their identities are known to each other. And obviously they're secret from the rest of the world. But there's one member who is the head of the team, and the other team members don't know who he is. They don't know his real name. And that doesn't come out really in the first issue, but it is a key part of the backstory of the team, is that one of the team members, the leader, a character named the Crimson Visage, no one else on the team knows his name, and he's the leader, and he's kind of the one that put the team together. So he's a little bit more, I thought that in my head, I was like, man, to really do this, there's going to be one person who's going to be a little bit more fringe and on the edge in terms of their maybe mental state. Not that he's nuts, but a little bit more outside the box and how they're approaching the world, that would even have the gall to try to put this thing together and hold it together. So for me, that informed who the leader was, who is this character Crimson Visage, and the other characters don't know his name. And whether it be over time or initially, like they've all just kind of come to know who each other actually is, and they refer to each other by their first names, and they only call, in the first issue, they only call Crimson Visage or Crim. The other characters just refer to themselves by their actual names. So yeah, and then I looked at who serves as what function in the group, right? So there's different kind of archetypal roles where you have like the strong man, and you have Sam as kind of the tech like wizard, right? And then you have the lithe kind of graceful, hawk kind of character, and that informs Swiftbird. But Swiftbird is also like, in my head, I was like, realistically, who's going to bankroll this thing, right? Who's going to pay for this stuff and keep the team afloat? So it was like, well, Swiftbird comes from a wealthy family, and she's just maxing out like credit cards off of like her dad's dime in order to keep the team going. And then there's Thea, who is Zola Wallace, and that's somebody that Sam's actually been seeing and is in a relationship with, and is another kind of bright-eyed like Sam. I wanted a couple people like that who are in it for, even if it is misguided, the right reasons, you know. And so all of them, I also wanted to build people who felt like they did not have good, solid connections in their normal lives, or those connections weren't what they were looking for. Like Swiftbird, like her, clearly, I think it's her family life is not something where she feels connected to, and she's looking for something. She's looking for something out of this group, and Crimson Visage is looking for something out of this group, and you know, the Feet and Sam and Zola, like they're all looking for something, and they have their own different reasons for being in the group. But they also, you can kind of feel it. That one scene with them is I wanted to feel like this is their family, the family of choice. Yeah. Is when we have those lack of connections, the best thing I think we can do is form our own family. You know, I feel like they have a hell of a Friendsgiving.
Yeah. From the one scene you see them all together, I feel like it's a pretty fun and maybe long night.
Yeah, and the Crimson Visage never takes his mask off, which is really weird for everybody at the Friendsgiving. You know,
it's very watch him like pushing the mashed potatoes through his mask.
Yeah, he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna take some home," or like, "Just stops by," yeah. Right? Like, whatever it is. I always feel like he's very business oriented, right? So it's like, but again, it's a family of choice. That's a concept I'm really fascinated by.
It's so like, I'm so excited for the rest of this book. Like, I read it a couple weeks ago, and just reading it, I had this feeling it feels more pulpy. Like it's not like super like high. The mundane scenes don't have as high energy as like the space scenes. And I felt the dynamic was walked very well, especially by the creative team of Adam Gorham and Kurt Michael Russell, who both are unbelievable superstars. Like, love both of them.
It's crazy. The art coming in is like, wow. It just blows me away. I mean, that's one of the best things of being a writer in comics in general, is that happening. But these guys, you know, I go on the Slack, you know, you go on Slack and Vault uses Slack, which is great. And I go on the Slack on my phone and the channel is bold, which means there's new posts. And I'm like, oh, I hope it's new art, you know, and then I'll go in and I'll have something colored or something new. It's great.
I did have one Iron Man question for one of our team, Ethan, who wanted me to ask. Mm-hmm. What draws you to Patsy Walker, and what do you think makes her a perfect partner / foil for Tony in your series?
Well, let's see. The first part, I love Patsy because her superpower. I mean, this is explored in my book and our book, and it changes somewhat. But I think I will say Patsy's best superpower is being a human being. She's very good at being a human being. You know, I think that from the moment she finds that cat costume in Avengers, she's like, I'm doing this, you know, and like she'd already kind of like, you know, her story's funny because she's so utility in everybody else's books, right? Rarely does she get her own little run. They're always great when they show up, but like, you know, she figured out that, you know, Hank McCoy had fur, you know, so she was like, I'm going to use this to my advantage and no longer be a housewife, and I want to become a superhero. And she's like, guess what, everybody? The Beast is Hank McCoy. And they're like, we know. And she's like, darn it. And she never gives up. And Hank's like, she's got a lot of heart, guys. Let's get her in some kind of costume. Like, and she just sticks in there, man. And she ends up showing up and doing, like, she's kind of like, you know, it's great. And I love that about her. And she's so precisely ordinary. And I think that's what makes her extraordinary. And then also, you know, she has a really intense, I think what I realized in piecing the little, you know, pieces of story, all these different issues and titles together, is she has a pretty intense mental health story arc over the last 20 some odd years that hasn't really it's been dealt with really well in some of the later kind of minis that folks have done. but I wanted to really stitch it all together and have it be a story told in hindsight of like where is she now considering all of the stuff she's been through, especially the stuff with Damon Hellstrom and then her own suicide.
Yeah.
And coming back from something like that and being given a second act. So that was the biggest, that was the primary lens I wanted to put on the character. And it takes, you know, I think a couple issues to get to that. Because Tony is like, you're not as famous as me or something. And she like unloads on him on the airplane and is like, hey, I've been through some serious stuff, man. And so to me, that makes her a really great foil, because not that Tony hasn't been through his own problems and his own suicidal tendencies, as many are quick to point out to me on Twitter. I know this. How dare she say these things to Tony? He's been through it himself so many times. How dare she? Okay, thanks.
I love Twitter. It's great.
Isn't it great? God.
I asked a question about Judge Dredd because I'd read one chapter of one book, and I was like, do most of the stories rely on satire, or do they amplify what this character is? And people, like, I woke up and my phone was blown up, and they're like calling me like a fucking idiot. They're like, CBR should fire you. And I'm like, how dare I try to broaden my horizons of...
It's a crazy thing, right? It's like Twitter is like, it turns every conversation topic or group interest into a biker bar.
Yeah.
Like, where like you are literally coming in, you're walking in going, hey, is Judge Dredd more satire? And it's like, it's the biker bar from like Ninth Configuration, right? Where they're like, we're going to torture you and beat you and pour beer on you. And you're like, holy fuck, I was just...
Yeah, I just wanted to know.
People are very protective. I mean, you know, comics are, there's a unique swath of people are drawn to them for various reasons. But again, I know that, and that, like, look, the Denny O'Neil Iron Man stuff, that's the primary inspiration for me. Then working on Tony, but right now, considering Tony's recent past, is Tony, and I think it's endemic to the character, he can have his head in the clouds a lot. He has time to spin on his own thoughts and motivations and wants and needs and beliefs and how to make the world a better place. And he has an intellect that is, I think, so powerful it risks being wildly out of control. And it's been backed up by an insane ego and sense of confidence that's been ratified since he was a little kid by his family name, right? So it's like, even though the guy can nowadays be like very self-effacing and humble and sit down, like, it's so easy and automatic for him to be like, I'm bulletproof. Did you forget that I'm Tony Stark? Hey, did you forget who I am and what I do and what I'm capable of? Not just as Tony Stark, but as the metal god that is Iron Man. You're welcome. I mean, it takes, I feel like Tony could be like, I'm glad to be here, guys. And, I'm going to take cues from everybody else. And all it would take would be for like someone to accidentally close the elevator door before Tony got in. And he's like, fuck the Avengers. You know what I mean? Like that's, he's got a hair trigger. So I feel like somebody like Patsy can live in that like ordinary place. Mm-hmm. In a virtuous way and take the pejorative qualities out of that word for Tony, it can help pull him down from the bullshit land.
All I can think of when you're describing that, Tony, is like Dennis Reynolds from It's Always Sunny, where he just loses his mind at any little inconvenience.
Yeah, I feel like I feel this way. I mean, to be honest, you got to write what you know. It's like, I'm always like, look, it's true. I'm a practicing Zen Buddhist, but like one small thing, and I'll be like, what the? Are you kidding me? That to me feels like Tony.
I did not know that about you. You're a practicing Zen Buddhist. Interesting.
Yeah.
I would have asked you about that if I knew that beforehand. I got to talk with Greg Sipes, who does Beast Boy's voice, about meditation, which was a very interesting conversation.
That's awesome. I didn't know he did meditation. That Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go, oh my God.
Yeah. That's incredible. The reason the character has changed is because like who he is the character. It's very interesting.
That's fascinating.
So, I have one big final question.
Okay.
If you had a Rube Goldberg machine, what would it do?
Ooh, that's good. Now I want my answer to be equally as good. Boy,
Gotcha.
I love Rube Goldberg. I actually have downstairs. I have a Rube Goldberg. I have a machine I haven't finished. It's a marble run, a self-perpetuating marble run with a little motor in it. Where the marbles reload and go back up. It's a 1983 Japanese marble run. And when I got it to build it, I built the elevator and the motor and everything already and wired it. All the instructions are in Japanese, which when I opened it up, I was like, oh, I got it on eBay. I'll never finish this. But all the pieces are alphanumeric. And it's incredible, the diagrams, because they tell you what to lay in first. And then, it's anyway. But it wouldn't be that. It would be... I don't know how writerly you want me to be here, but I would say because immediately I was like, it would be a really beautiful, vintage 1980s Japanese space themed marble run. But there would be a step in there where the ultimate conclusion of the marble run would be that it would remind me to calm down and take care of myself.
That's a beautiful end.
And then I would do that for a little while the marbles are going back in and reloading up. And then I would eventually start to speed up and not take care of myself and become frantic. And then by the time the marble would come around the corner, it would be like, it'd be like, calm down,
It's like free therapy.
Down, have something to eat and then reset and come back up and do the same thing. So I would need a marble run that would also serve as some sort of parent to me.
Therapy. It's your therapist.
Yeah, it's my therapist. Yeah.
Therapy marbles.
Mm-hmm. Therapy marbles.
Chris, this is incredible. Thank you for coming. Where can people find you?
Or
your stuff.
Yeah.
Come to my house.
Don't come to my house because it's going to be fire season soon. So I'm still on Iron Man. Iron Man number 8 came out this month on the 14th. So that's still on the stands. It's not out next month because of Heroes Reborn is being launched. So everything's taken a break for a little bit. All the Avengers titles will be back in June with Iron Man number 9. But Iron Man's not in it. It's a Korvac solo story, which is very exciting, featuring another character that I've been dying to write since I learned about him as a kid before I was a professional writer. So he shows up as well. Oh, I just spoiled it. It's a he. Him and Korvac in issue 9. And then Tony comes back in issue 10 in a big way. And then it's solo Tony for a couple months. So that's through the summer. Let's see. Everything Volume 2 came out earlier this month. And that's the end of that story. I'm very proud of that. Our evil department store story, I think, reached a really beautiful and satisfying conclusion. Blue Flame is May 26th. And then there'll be some other stuff along the way. Some more She Could Fly is going to be announced soon, I think I can finally say. And then there'll be still yet other books. And you can watch *Halt and Catch Fire* on Netflix. And my film I directed called *The Parts You Lose*, starring Aaron Paul, on Netflix and Amazon Prime. You got to rent it. Sorry. Pay some money.
Wow. Got a lot of stuff there.
Same as an issue.
I'm really excited to see Big Wheel in Iron Man issue 9. Can't believe you're going to write Big Wheel in there.
Big Wheel. Yes, it's going to be Big Wheel. Big Wheel and Iron Man. The title is going to change actually for a few months. Big Wheel and Iron Man.
It's actually the next event in King of Black.
Tom Brevoort approved it himself. When he hears this, he will say, "Yep, I'm super excited for it." Big Wheel, and that will pivot to Iron Man becoming Big Wheel solo in perpetuity, and there will be no more Iron Man. Iron Man will die in issue 12, and Big Wheel will take over the book for the foreseeable future until they cast him for the MCU.
I cannot wait to see Big Wheel on the big screen. Then the Fast and Furious crossover. It's going to be unbelievable. You can find us at gatecrashers.fan and on Twitter at gatecrasherspod. Talk to you next week. The Gate Crashers.